Is there really anyone out there who expects OPEC Plus to surprise the market once again with a decision to bring extra production back to market? Because, of course, there is still a 1.66 million barrel per day voluntary cut that was introduced a couple of years ago that could be up for discussion.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that's a really good question. Who's expecting this increase? Bloomberg, we had a survey of analysts and market watchers, and the vast majority think that the meeting that will be held on September 7th on Sunday will just be a rubber stamping and there won't be an increase. Now, there is a smaller group of analysts, a minority, who thinks that there could be a modest increase to production from the next month. Now, that's actually kind of interesting because in the past, the analysts haven't always been right? We're talking about the surprise hikes that have been happening since April, but they had signaled that those hikes had been finished after those 2.5 million barrels had been entered into the market. Now, the big question is, do they want to add these 1.66 million barrels starting to do that now? Because the plan was to do that by the end of 2026. So there's a lot of wiggle room. You're already in a really frothy market. So is this about, adding barrels to the market because they think that there's still some tightness? Or is this about capturing market share? I think those will be somewhat the topics that will be discussed when they meet on Sunday.
Yeah, and to what extent do you think some of the geopolitical considerations are also going to have to be factored in? We talk about, the ongoing potential discussions between Russia and Ukraine. President Trump has sort of flouted the possibility of extra secondary sanctions on countries that buy Russian oil. He's done that with India, though it hasn't really had a noticeable impact on Russian production. To what extent do you think that could be a determinant of where we go in terms of, one, OPEC Plus decision-making, and two, the price of oil in the coming months?
I mean, certainly geopolitics is swinging the price of oil quite a bit over the last few weeks, months, years even. I mean, Trump has, and what he says has a large impact. And what happens between Russia, the war in Ukraine, and the pressure the Trump administration puts on certain buyers, in particular India, does also have an impact on global oil flows and the price of oil, not just internationally, but also in the United States itself, something that Trump cares deeply about. Now, I think there's one thing, when you talk about geopolitics and relations between countries, I think one other thing that perhaps OPEC Plus will have to be looking at closely will be tariff and the impact of tariffs, right? Where is the global economy, the health of the global economy? Because that is something that's a bit easier to measure compared to what's Trump going to decide one day and wake up. When you look at the measures and the tariffs on the table, OPEC Plus will be looking, and their analysts will be looking at economic growth or economic slowdown because of those tariffs. So I think that's one of the major factors that there will be in play here, because when you look at China, for example, Chinese demand hasn't been living up to where analysts thought they would be at this time of year. There's been a slump, or not a slump, but there hasn't been the growth that was to be expected. At the same time, you look domestically in the United States, they're going to be seeing what U.S. policies are going to be doing to that market, because the U.S. is a major consumer of oil. And some early indications are that demand might not really be there either, because we've seen an oversized increase in inventories this week at the main Cushing facility. At the same time, you're also seeing run rates at refineries at the lowest level in a few months. So those together also indicate a bit of a weaker market. And those factors, the geopolitics, but also just domestic politics of America will have an impact on what they decide.